Hi, I'm Suresh Venkat. Welcome to this very special roundtable on women in technology. I'm very happily outnumbered on this panel. Let me introduce them. Dr. Ganesh is the CEO of Global Talent Track, a firm that specializes in educational initiatives and corporate training and solutions. We have Sushma Rajagopalan, Global Partner and Managing Director, Luquidhub India, a firm that specializes in digital integration. Anita Bhogle is an alumnus of IIT-B and IIM Ahmedabad. She is the co-founder of Prosearch Consultants and Biz Pundits and co-author of The Winning Way. Ladies, welcome to this panel discussion. I promised you at the start of this discussion, I'll try and steer away from the cliches that involve debates on women in technology and women in the workplace. Let me start with what is hopefully a non-cliched question. Marissa Mayer of Yahoo took the job when she was pregnant. Did that send the right message or the wrong message? Sushma, I'd like to ask you this question first. Does it set an unrealistically high expectation of what women are meant to do in the workplace?
I think rightfully or wrongfully you pointed it to the right person, because fundamentally I am someone who does believe that work is fun. Okay? This whole concept of work-life balance is an overrated concept. Okay? And I would have felt terrible if Marissa Mayer did not get the job just because she was pregnant. So for all of those reasons, I absolutely think she did the right thing.
Why do you think work-life balance is overrated, or the phrase is overrated?
The phrase is overrated because if you're having fun at work, right, and if you're truly enjoying yourself, right, you will find ways to figure out that balance and figure out time and energy to devote to things that are passionate to you and that are core to you, right? It's only when you can't do that that you're looking for ways and means to say, oh, you know, I've got to balance this with that. I mean, I lead a full life. I live out of a suitcase half the time. But yet, I have time for my family, to be a daughter-in-law, to be a daughter to my mother.
It's not an either-or. It's a both-and question.
I mean, life is an amalgamation of things.
Okay. Anita, I'm going to come to you with the same question. So, Sushma Rajagopalan says she's happy that Marissa Mayer was offered the job. My question was specifically, should Marissa Mayer have accepted the job? And does that set an unrealistically high expectation of other women?
I think I have a slightly different take on this. I think it's between the employer and the employee really on what their plans are. So I think if the employer wants a very long-term kind of a plan and the woman is going to take some time off, and it doesn't fit into the scheme of things, then I think they've got to work it out mutually. So I don't think, you know, but if she's going to come back and it's okay, then there's nothing wrong at all in saying that you're pregnant and the employer offering you a job. And
it's not particularly her problem if she sets a high standard for other women or not.
Yeah, so I would really say it's a very individual thing. And having had a career of about 30 years now, you know, this whole issue of going back to work very soon, I think taking a few months off for your baby, I think is more important when you put it in perspective over a career of so many years. So I think everything has a place, your career has a place, your children have a place, and so my take is slightly different. Okay. I think when you have a child, you deserve to give it some attention for a few months.
Let me go to Dr. Ganesh. Dr. Ganesh, does it ever occur to you that you're a woman in this industry? Is it even part of your consciousness?
That's a good question. Yes, at times I do feel that yes, I'm a woman and I need to function or behave a little differently. But not because of the question that you raised earlier, like work-life balance, for instance. That has never occurred to me because in the corporate or the work life also, you have some mundane and boring activities and you also want to have fun. So you're constantly making an effort to strike a balance wherever you are and whatever you're doing. So because of that reason, I don't think there is any kind of a different feel I have experienced being a woman. But where I have definitely felt that it was important to recognize this difference between a male and a female manager is how you deal with your colleagues, and particularly if they belong to, let's say, if you're dealing with men as your subordinates or as your peers or as your seniors, and similarly if they are women, there is definitely a difference in terms of how you would be perceived and therefore how your styles require to be adapted. No doubt about that.
Okay, on that note, let me, I said I won't ask you a cliched question, but I'm going to invoke a cliche. most articles about women managers are sort of hagiographic, saying women have higher emotional quotient, they're better managers, they are better dealing with problems, they have a better melding of the analytical and the creative sides of their brain. I find all these comments to be a bit of a cliche, because there are some good women managers and admittedly some bad women managers, and some good men and some bad men. Sushma Rajagopalan, have you seen this as a trend? Are women managers inherently better than men?
Not really, Suresh. I think ultimately, if you look at managers or leaders, right, there are a couple of things that define a leader, right? You have to have clarity of thought. I think men and women, both alike, can and do have clarity of thought. The second is courage of conviction, right? And I think both can have it. The third is the confidence level. Now, there could be societal factors that could actually pull somebody and could deter somebody from exhibiting that kind of confidence, right? And that could be skewed based on gender. And that, I think, is a societal factor as opposed to something that's inherent in women managers and leaders or men managers and leaders.
Okay. Ms. Ganesh, there is the classical image of the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Bill Gates and the Paul Allens and the Larry Ellisons of being these hyper geeky kids and who went on to become super successful CEOs. Were you geeky as a kid?
I don't think I was a geeky as a kid. I don't think that really, if you're saying whether technology turned me on, I don't think so. But what really turned me on was the different facets around what technology is capable of doing, and particularly the fact that it can touch millions of people and make a huge difference to their lives. That really turned me on and prompted me to think about setting up something of my own and being entrepreneurial.
So I'm going to refer to Sushma's earlier point of social conditioning, right? When you expressed an interest in technology and how business can solve problems and setting up things on your own, were you subtly pushed to saying, no, learn Bharatanatyam instead, or do music instead, or take a softer career option? Were you subtly, not obviously, but subtly pushed towards those directions and the technology is for the boys?
Actually, on the contrary, my parents actually encouraged me to take the harder decision.
Okay.
They never were in favor of only doing soft things in life. I mean, if you talked about Bharatanatyam and dance and languages and arts and all of that, I got a huge amount of exposure to all of that.
So once again, it's a both and world. It's not an either or world.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Anita Bhogle, I'm going to refer to another woman leader, Sheryl Sandberg. In her book, Lean In, she says she's written a book on how women can achieve both professional and personal goals by leaning into their ambitions. Why does nobody ever write such books for men? Why do we need to tell women how to achieve personal and professional goals, whereas for men it's deemed automatic that I can achieve both?
Yeah, that's why people talk about the complete man and not the complete woman, because I think the balancing happens on the side for the men and the other way for the women.
Why is this challenge so much more difficult for women?
I think
or is it more difficult for women to do this balance?
I'm not so sure about the younger generation, but definitely in our time it was kind of, there was conditioning saying that you've got to manage your career, but then you've got to manage your home first and then the career.
So admittedly, a man would also have to manage home a little bit. He's also somebody's son.
He's more as the provider,
son-in-law.
Whereas the woman was the caregiver, which was time consuming compared to providing. So I think it's a matter of time. So.
Okay.
But there are women who are writing. My friend Apurva Purohit has written a book saying, "Lady, you're not a man," and these issues are being addressed. So I'm sure there'll be another book.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you short. So if you take Sandberg's comment on leaning in, right, it's also very contextual that women have the option of saying, hey, you know, I'm left behind, or I could reach out or lean in and make things conducive for them, right? So I think you have to take it in the context that there is this prevalent notion that there is, you know, sex and gender bias, right? And that is holding back women. And rather than just pointing to the world and saying, hey, bail me out, you can lean in and bail yourself out. So just wanted to give you that perspective.
Speaking of gender bias and holding you back, did you ever hit the glass ceiling in your career, or was it all smooth sailing?
Look, we all hit ceilings of some kind.
No, because you were a woman.
Right? And I don't believe so. Okay, and I have worked in a very, very male-dominated industry, male-dominated. I think in every company that I have been in, I've either been the single woman in the executive team, single woman in a board setting, right? Single woman in a global board setting who was a migrant, right? So I think life has been kind to me, but life, you know, there is a fair share of kindness and unkindness, right? And you just have to have the resilience in you to just pick yourself up and move on. And if you realize that a place is not for you, find something that's conducive for you.
So you should focus on the positive rather than the negative, because I think everybody has a mixed bag.
Okay. Dr. Ganesh, did you ever face the glass ceiling?
I would say that in the early part of my career, especially in the very early stage of my career, I did face a lot of challenge, particularly in an environment where possibly there were no previous women managers around, and I was probably one of the first to be hired in that situation. I did face a huge challenge. And in fact, the first 2 or 3 years, the challenge was such that I had to fight it out, and I had to have the determination and perseverance to say, okay, what am I going to do? Should I be sticking around? Should I be looking at...
What made you fight? What made you decide to fight?
2 things. One was this deep conviction that I had in myself and my capability, which I didn't want to be, you know, shaken up by somebody else thinking that I'm not capable of performing the job, which somebody else thought maybe men are better to perform in that particular role. And second was the fact that I felt somehow obliged to the society. I mean, it might be a very motherhood kind of a statement, but I felt at that point of time, I was very privileged to have reached up to that stage. And I felt very guilty of actually not fighting it out.
And letting other women down, perhaps.
And letting other women down, letting my family down, and letting myself down. So I think those were the first 2 or 3 years I would say that I had to struggle. But after that, there has been no looking back.
Let's talk about the structure of corporate boards and companies in India. Many companies, Sushma Rajagopalan, pay lip service to gender equality. It will be there on their website, on inclusion. And yet, I've seen this from personal experience, have to be dragged kicking and screaming to do simple things like build a creche, for instance, or have a more liberal maternity leave policy, comply more than what the law requires you to. Most companies who say this do completely different things. Is this a case for government to intervene and set a standard saying you cannot go below this standard?
See, I'm of the belief that a lot of these changes are not brought about by governments, but they are brought about by private enterprises, right? Today we are living in a world of enlightened businesses, and enlightened businesses have to look for ways and means to acquire talent, retain talent, and sustain talent. And these are very basic. And if you've got a large growing demographic of extremely talented women, right? If you're an organization that is not going to cater to this, you're going to lose out competitively. So I am a huge believer in free market and competitive forces as opposed to governmental intervention at this level to build creches, right?
Like minimum wage regulation, for instance, is simple government intervention.
Minimum wage is an economic fair standard that a government has to set, right? After which competitive forces can take over. But beyond that, to make life, you know, fun for employees, Google has set a standard. Not everybody can be a Google, right? But there might be organizations, small or big, that, like for instance, we run a group called Sankalp. Okay, Sankalp is all for women. We have close to 31% of our workforce, which is women. And Sankalp is run by the women, for the women, and we provide them all kinds of avenues, right? So I think each company today is looking for ways and means by which they could provide an environment that'll make people tick.
But we leave it to the free market and an enlightened self-interest.
I think so, especially when it comes to enterprises and corporations.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
I beg to differ there. I think in this country, when we're talking about women who have the opportunity to participate in the corporate sector, it is a very, very small percentage. I mean, it will be less than 1% of women who can actually come forward and take advantage. And the reason for this is obvious: family, social structures, and so on and so forth. So just as we are now fighting for women's reservation in the parliament, which is yet to go through, we have a long way to go in terms of enabling talented women, capable women to take advantage of the opportunities which are available. Therefore, if there is one thing that we should really be looking at doing, would be to, at least for the next 50 years, come out in favor of policies which governments, small companies, large companies should think of in terms of enabling more women to join the workforce, and especially educated women, women who have been able to finish graduation, women who have been able to finish up to school. This country, you know, when we are talking about demographic dividend, how on earth we will even be able to get these women to participate in becoming demographic dividend if the basic comfort that they require, not even comfort, the basic necessities that are required for women to balance the social structures and the corporate structures, if they are not put in place. So I'm very much in favor of creating some such support system by the government.
Right. So let me ask you a follow-up.
If I can just follow up, support systems are very different from mandates, right? I would definitely.
No, it could be a mandate. If you have more than 10 women in the office,
yes.
a creche is mandatory.
Yes.
It could be a
so
mandate.
That's a support system.
You don't have a choice in the matter.
So a combination of policy and commitment.
Sorry,
Right.
we're interrupting you, but go ahead.
No, that's all right. It's your prerogative. But now the point that I'm trying to say, so regulation has a place,
Okay.
right? However, regulation is often not a catalyst.
Okay.
A catalyst is when there is homegrown movement.
Okay.
And on one hand, here we are talking about digital economies. Okay, we are talking about doing things which are extraordinary. Yeah, I'm all for promoting a culture for entrepreneurship. You want to talk about rural women who have, you have microfinancing, which is taken off in a big way, right? Empower them that way. But to have regulatory mandates and reservations, I mean, to me, reservation is something that you're going backward in terms of your thinking.
Okay.
So, you know, I believe that governmental policies can enable, private organizations and enterprises should embrace free economy and do what's right to foster competitiveness.
Okay. So some say regulation, some say foster competitiveness. I'm going to ask Anita Bhogle for a counter reaction. Should we have reservations on corporate boards for women? 2 seats on every board mandatory for a woman? If you're open to reservations in parliament, then that's a good thing.
Well, I think you should have women in the board, please, but kind of forcing things down and having women who are not really qualified for the job, I think is
a lot of men would make that argument saying there are not enough qualified women.
Yeah, so there has to be fairness. So I think instead of just going to the highest level, more women have to be encouraged to get to that position and not
well, pressure from the highest level trickle down to more women enter the workplace, knowing that they can make it to the top.
Yeah.
Should we have tax benefits, for instance, if your board has more than 3 women, should you get a little rebate on your corporate income tax perhaps? Is the incentive method the way to do it?
Well,
if
I
regulation
think
is not?
that is stretching things a bit too far.
It's not women like us who really
but-
need that much help. It's down the line and younger people who need all the attention.
Doing it for the wrong reasons. If you have a tax incentive, I would shudder to be on a board of a company that gets tax rebate because I'm there.
The affirmative action policy in the US is debating that. You're not required to do it, but if you do it, then we'll look upon you more kindly.
Right.
But it's not required of you. You have a choice. It's free market, and you do it. If you don't,
I would think that if we can have a framework by which we can get more women actually to participate in creating more economic value and contribute towards the GDP of the country, that in itself will be a greater contribution.
What's going to be the biggest driver to that? You run a training company that trains a lot of women. What's going to be that killer app, if I may use the word, to bring the multitudes of women into the workforce and to help them?
The digital framework, which every company, every state, every school, college, home, if they can all be part of that, that is going to completely revolutionize the way we are able to educate the women, the way we are able to bring them to be part of the workforce, to get them to think, to get them to collaborate and create a strong, positive energy being developed. That is really going to be the killer app.
Sushma Rajagopalan, same question to you. What is going to be that one snowball that's going to become an avalanche of women in the workplace and for this debate to become irrelevant?
2 things, education and entrepreneurialism world over, not
Has
just
shown.
India, okay? It could touch rural India, it could touch rural America, right? I think at the crux of it, it comes to the 2 E's, education and promoting and
those are the two pillars
ways,
on which it will rest.
the 2 pillars on which, you know, women will find their voice, will find their own confidence and their own ability to steer themselves as opposed to be dependent on anybody else.
Anita Bhogle, final question for you. Recent episodes both in the courts in India and in media organizations have indicated the kind of harassment that women face, and these are educated women like you and from the same social sector as you and from the same social sector as me. And these women who are educated and empowered and have access are facing harassment. One can only shudder to think what's happening down the line. Is this the case? Does this make a case for really strong regulation both on how women are employed and governed and a strong regulation on whistleblowers?
You know, regulation is one thing, but people find their ways around regulation. So there was this debate on saying that, you know, you have to do X, Y, Z, and people said we won't hire women at all. Of course, there was an outrage.
Can people afford to say that? I mean, it's
no, that's what I'm
like
saying. It's not something that people want to say, but what is stopping people from actually doing something like that?
Competitive pressure, I would argue, that if the woman is more qualified and smarter, you can't but hire the woman on competitive grounds.
No, yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So you can find your way around things like that, but I think what is more important is that you've got to find solutions in society and change the mindset. And actually realize that what Sushma said earlier, that you are a workforce that you can't afford to ignore.
So regulation alone is not the answer.
It's not enough. Of course, regulation has to be there, but I think society needs to change.
The necessary but not sufficient condition.
Absolutely.
Education and entrepreneurship and empowerment are the real killer
apps. And now we have enough education, I mean educated women. So I think that barrier we've crossed a little bit, but more flexibility, as she said, more flexibility, more support systems.
Dr. Ganesh, Sushma Rajagopalan and Anita Bhogle, it's been a pleasure having you on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking to me.
Thank you.